All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. This is the second class that we're giving in honor of Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe's 30th yard site coming up next week. So this is the second and probably last of these classes. And then we'll probably finish up our classes on Pirkei Avos at some point, Ethics of Our Fathers, and at some point we will get back to studying the Parsha. Okay. So, of course, this Torah learning is in the merit of all the Jewish people, especially those in the land of Israel and those on the front lines, those that need to be rescued and need a refuah shalema, need a recovery, and God should be with them. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to be discussing tonight why traditionally Jewish people pray at cemeteries, pray at the graves of righteous people, and some historical context for that, and the significance, religious significance of that, and let's get into it. So the first source we have of this is the matriarch Rachel. The Torah discusses why was Rachel, why was she buried on the road? The Torah tells us that they were traveling. Jacob and his family were traveling. Rachel passes away in childbirth during the birth of Benjamin, and she is buried on the road. So the Torah tells us she's buried on the road, on the way to on the road to Ephrat. So the Medrash says, why was she buried there? Because he foresaw that the Jewish exiles, when they were being exiled from the first temple period, they would be passing by there. Therefore, he buried her there, so she would beg for mercy for them. As the verse says, the verse in Yirmiyah, it says, a voice is heard on high, lamentation, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. And this is also quoted by Rashi on that verse. The Rashi comments on the verse in Genesis that when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, exiled the Jewish people, they passed by her tomb. Rachel cried for them, beseeched them on high, and again quotes the same verse. So we see here that Jacob specifically buried Rachel at that point. He buried Rachel over there on the road, so that way the Jewish people, they have a place to pray, and Rachel could go and on high and beg for mercy for the Jewish people who were being exiled by Nebuchadnezzar, the evil emperor who destroyed the first temple. Okay, that's the first source that we have in the Torah. The next source comes from a couple of weeks ago in the Torah portion. It discusses the spies, that when the spies go, when they go to check out the land of Israel, it says that they went up in the south, and he came to Chevron. So obviously the $1 million question is, why does the Torah say, and he came to Chevron? It should have said, and they came to Chevron. There were 12 spies, but only it says he came to Chevron. So Rashi brings from the Talmud. The Talmud in Sota says that this teaches us that Kalev separated himself from the spies. Kalev, there were 2 spies who had been, there were 12 spies total for 12 tribes. 10 of them devised a plot to say bad things about the land of Israel and that they didn't want to go. One of them was Joshua. Joshua had a blessing from Moses. His name was changed from Hosea to Yehoshua. He's given Yud as a letter from God's name, and he's given this letter to give him the strength to overcome the plot of the spies, of the other 10 spies. But Kalev, he was from the tribe of Judah. He also didn't want to participate. He needed strength. He didn't have a blessing from Moses, so he goes to Chevron. Chevron is where the patriarchs are buried. So it says, and he came to Chevron because he actually separated from the group, and he traveled to Chevron to pray, so he would be successful in withstanding temptation. He said to them, my forefathers, pray for me, I be saved from the plot of the spies. So we see here again that somebody is going to pray by a grave in order to ask that person to beg mercy from them. So the question is, why? How does this work? What is the source on a spiritual level? Obviously, we see clearly in the Torah people praying by graves, at least hinted to in the Torah. So let's get into it. In what the Zohar says in Parsha's Achrei Mos, the Zohar discusses this idea. The Zohar says that when the world needs mercy from the living, and the living are suffering, people go to pray at grave sites, and they inform those who sleep in Chevron. In other words, the people who are the people who are at the grave goes to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are buried in Chevron, and they go and ask for mercy on high. They awaken and enter the Gan Eden, and where the Ruach, the spirit of the righteous, dwell, and take counsel with them and issue decrees for the benefit of humanity. And God grants their desire and has pity on the world. And the level of soul, there's different levels, and each one goes into different levels. The Zohar goes into the different levels of the soul and how that relates to this process. And the Zohar continues describing this, and continues describing this, and eventually it tells us a story as follows. The story is as follows. Rabbi Chia said, I wonder if there's anyone who knows how to communicate with the dead, including us. Rabbi Abba answered, the Torah informs them. The pain informs them, and the Torah informs them. When nobody knows how to communicate, a Torah is brought to the graves, and they are aroused by the Torah's presence, and then the angel Domeh, which is the angel in charge of cemeteries, informs them. Okay, so here the Zohar says that Rabbi Chia says if people don't know the process of how this long Kabbalistic process of how to talk to people who already passed on, that the Torah informs them. And what you do is you bring a Torah scroll to a grave, and then the person is aroused by the Torah and goes and helps these people. And Rabbi Yosei said, they know the world is in pain, but the living are not able to communicate to them. Then everyone cries over the Torah being exiled to the cemetery. If people repent and cry with a pure heart and return to God, they can all gather and beseech for mercy and inform the old ones of Chevron. Again, these are referring to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are buried in Chevron, who will inform the spirit in Gan Eden. Here the Zohar tells us that the custom apparently in those times was to bring a Torah scroll to the cemetery, which would arouse the people who passed away to go on high and talk to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who would arouse mercy on high. So here's an amazing story discussed in the Zohar. One day, Rabbi Chizkiah and Rabbi Yesa, were in Gush Chalav, and that laid in ruins. Gush Chalav is a place in Israel. They sat near the cemetery, and Rabbi Esau was holding part of a torn Sefer Torah. As they were sitting, one grave began to shout, and said, "Ay, ay," which translates, I guess you could say "ay," but translates as "woe is to me." Right? The world is in distress. The Torah has been brought here, and the living have come to poke fun of us with their Torah. Rabbi Chizkiah and Rabbi Yesa were shocked at what's going on. So they're sitting there with, for some reason, Rabbi Yesa had this torn Torah scroll, and this grave starts to yell and shout and saying the Torah is being brought here. They're making fun of us. See, he said, "Who are you?" So this grave responds, and he says, "I am dead, and I was aroused by the Torah scroll. Once the world was in distress, and the living came here to arouse us with the Torah scroll. My friends and I went to Chevron, and when we connected with the spirits of the tzaddikim, it was revealed that the Torah scroll was invalid, since a letter Vav was added to a verse, and they lied in the name of God. They said that since they lied in the name of the king, we should respond to them, and they pushed us out of the heavenly academy. We should not respond to them, and they pushed us out of the heavenly academy." So apparently there was this story that this dead person had been there was some problem in their community. They brought a Torah scroll to the cemetery, but the Torah, unbeknownst to them, the Torah scroll was not kosher. It had an extra vav in a certain word, and since it had an extra word, they felt that it was they were lying in the name of Hashem, and they were kicked. These souls were kicked out of the heavenly academy, and they did not respond to them. Then one elder brought Rabbi Hamnuna's Torah scroll, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon was aroused. So now they brought a kosher Torah scroll to this grave, and now he was aroused. He went to Gan Eden and begged for mercy upon them, and the world was healed. Then we were allowed entry again. So they were allowed back into the heavenly academy. From that day, when Rabbi Elazar was brought up from the cemetery and given to his father, nobody is willing to beseech before the sleepers of Chevron, for we remain scared for the day we will be thrown out of the heavenly academy. Now you have come with a Torah scroll. We said among ourselves, the world must be in distress. We were worried who would go inform the sleepers of Chevron. Rabbi Esau left with the Torah, with this part of the Torah scroll. Rabbi Chizkiah responded, God forbid, the world is not in distress. We have not come for that. Rabbi Chizkiah and Rabbi Esau rose and departed. Certainly, in the absence of living tzaddikim, the world only continues in the merit of the deceased. So we see here that even though these tzaddikim have passed away onto the next world, obviously the world continues to function in their merit. That was the takeaway that Rabbi Esau and Rabbi Chizkiah had. So that, in fact, we see again the Zohar explains this old tradition of bringing a Torah scroll to the cemetery. So now the $1 million question is, how could it be that you're allowed to go talk to the dead? We know the Torah strictly prohibits such behavior, and the rabbis in the Zohar asked this exact question. Rabbi Esau then asked, when the world needs rain, why do we go to the cemetery? Why do we go to the dead? Rabbi Chizkiah replied that and he says the Torah forbids it. Right? It says, Lo yimatzi b'chavi yidayni v'der shal mason. You should not go to a yidayni, which is a type of magician, or to somebody who talks to the dead, some sort of person who thinks that they could talk to the dead. So Rabbi Chizkiah responds to Rabbi Esau, and he says, the dead to whom the verse refers to are certainly to be termed dead, i.e., they are the people who are heathens, they were idol worshippers, and those people are forever dead. But of Israel, who are righteous, meaning a righteous person, King Solomon says, and I praise the dead, for they are already dead. They have died in the past, but now they are living. So that we see here that the Jewish people, they are considered, that who are righteous, those people are considered living even after they have passed on. So therefore, that's not what the Torah is referring to. The Torah is referring to talking to idolaters, people who sinned in the previous world. That is considered Dorish El HaMesim. Okay. Furthermore, when other nations visit the dead, they come with magic to arouse evil spirits upon themselves. When by contrast, the Jewish people visit the dead, they come in profuse repentance before God, with a contrite heart, and with fasting, and with intent that the holy souls entreat God for mercy on their behalf, and then for their sake he has compassion on the world. So we see here that the number one, the Jewish people are not coming to talk to people who have sinned. They're coming to talk to righteous tzaddikim, and those people are not considered dead. And furthermore, they don't come with sorcery and magic tricks and to put spirits, but rather they come in a sense of tshuva. They come in a way of repentance, and that they sometimes fast, etc., in order to be that they're showing that they're not coming to talk to the dead, rather they're coming to do teshuva. In regards to this, we learned a righteous man, even when he departs from this world, the Zohar, this is the end of the Zohar, does not truly depart from any world. For he is to be found in all worlds more than in his lifetime. In his lifetime he is found only in this world, but afterwards he is found in 3 worlds and accessible therein. So we see here that the Torah tells us that when we go to a righteous person's grave, it is not considered. It is, in fact, they are considered alive, more alive than they were in their lifetime, because now they are alive in this world and in the previous world. Again, because as we spoke last time, that what a righteous person's life really is about. It's not their physical life, but their spiritual life, which continues on. Okay, so now let's continue discussing a little bit more about why there are great tzaddikim who are buried outside of the land of Israel, and like we see about Rachel was buried on the way, and others. So we have a very fascinating idea brought in Genesis. The Torah tells us that Jacob and Esau meet and have this confrontation in Parshas Vayishlach, and during this confrontation, at the end, Esau says to Yaakov, let's go, let travel, we will go, and I will go alongside you. In other words, our sages tell us that in fact he was telling Jacob, listen, it's the time has come for Mashiach to arrive, that I am ready, and I'm ready to travel with you. and Mashiach should come now. Let's go together and we'll go to the land of Israel. Because the ultimate of Mashiach is that Esau is now joins Yaakov, that Esau joins Jacob and recognizes God in the same way. And Yaakov responds, and he says as follows. He says, no, I can't go. Why? The children are tender, the sheep and the cattle which are raising their young, and if we push them too hard, they will die. Therefore, I will move at my own pace. And he says to Esau, you go in your way, I'll go on my own pace. So now the question is, it sounds like that Jacob is saying, not that Esau isn't ready for Mashiach to go to the land of Israel together. Esau is saying that, in fact, it's Jacob. Jacob is saying it's my family's fault. They're not ready, and we see, in fact, that is the truth. That really Yaakov was ready, Esau was ready, but who wasn't ready was his family, the young ones, the tender ones, and therefore Yaakov remained in exile with them in order to continue guiding them and shepherding his own family, even though that he, in truth, was ready to go to Mashiach. But that is not the way it works, is that the righteous leaders stay with their flock. And in fact, we see Moses had the same thing. Moses did not go into the land of Israel, and he prayed that he should go into the land of Israel. It says that he prayed hundreds of times to go into the land of Israel, but Moses did not go in, and he still hasn't gone in. He's still in the desert in Har Nevo, which is a mountain outside of the Jordan, right? Moses goes on top of the mountain. He gets to see the land of Israel, but he's not allowed in. So God says, in the Medrash Tanchuma, says as follows, that Moses could have gone into the land of Israel, and God could have allowed Moses to go, but his generation wasn't ready. So God said, people would say, you enter the land of Israel yourself. What do you do with the 600,000 members of your generation that remained in the desert? So Moses had to stay because his generation stayed. So because, in other words, Moses on his own was ready to go to the land of Israel, but since his flock could not go into the land of Israel, Moses stays behind with them. And the Medrash continues and says that it gives a mashal, gives a parable, that there was once a shepherd who went to take care of the king's flock of sheep, and the flock was stolen. And the shepherd wanted to come into the king's palace. But the king said, others will say that you caused them to be stolen. So too, God says to Moses, will your legacy be that you buried 600,000 people in the desert and brought a different generation into the land? Remain at their side and come with them in the future. As the verse states, he came at the head of the people. So, in fact, that Moses is going to lead them. That is the whole point, is that Moses is waiting for his generation to be ready, and then he will lead them together with his people into the land of Israel. And similarly, we also see with Joseph, previously at the beginning of the exile of Egypt, compared to Moses at the end, obviously, that Joseph says that he is unlike his father Jacob, he was buried even though he passed away in Egypt, he was taken out and buried in the land of Israel. Joseph says, my bones are going to stay here, and you're going to take me and he gives them that faith that he's saying, no, there's really going to be a redemption. You're really going to be redeemed. And the fact is that I'm not going to be buried in the land of Israel until you take me out. So, and this was a great encouragement to the Jewish people, that Joseph stayed with them that whole time, because they knew that he had faith that there would be a redemption. And the same is true of the Chabad Rebbes. All the Chabad Rebbes, starting from the Baal Shem Tov, through all 7 generations of Chabad, all of the Chabad Rebbes were buried not in the land of Israel, but they were buried in Galus. They were buried in exile together with their community, and in order to give them an ability that they can continue to inspire their communities, even though that they have passed away, but they were not buried in the land of Israel, even though that was a possibility. And in fact, after the previous Rebbe passed away in 1950, the Rebbe himself would go and spend many, many hours at his Ohel, where now the Rebbe is buried as well, at the Ohel in Queens, New York. He would spend much time there. He would go, starting off in the beginning of his leadership, he would go at least twice a month, eventually going more closer to twice a week, sometimes even more than that. And he would spend many hours there, and he would read blessings and requests that he had gotten from all over the world. And he would read it at the graveside of his father-in-law, who he considered his Rebbe and the leader of his generation. And he continued to receive inspiration there until the end of his life. And it's a very special thing to be able to go to the Ohel and write a request. And today, thank God, we have technology, and you don't even have to, even if you're not able to go in person, which I would highly recommend if you're ever in the New York metro area. Definitely, it's an amazing experience, a very peaceful, tranquil experience to go to the Ohel and say a prayer. But it's a tremendous experience that you could do from your phone or your computer. You go to ohel.org, ohel.org, and you can put your name and your mother's name. That's the Jewish tradition. Put your name and your mother's name and ask for a blessing. You don't have to ask for anything specific. You could just put your name, whatever it is. But it's a tremendous opportunity to connect to this tzaddik that he could arouse merit on high. I'll just read, just to finish off, a small, and by the way, of course, coming up for the Rebbe's Yahrzeit, of course, is an extra special time to write a note and send to the Ohel. I'll just read a excerpt from a short excerpt from a letter that the Rebbe wrote in 1951, about a little bit more than a year after his father's passing. His father-in-law's passing, I'm sorry. And in this letter, he's actually writing a congratulatory letter to somebody who had been a part of sponsoring the mausoleum that exists till today at the Ohel. So the Rebbe writes as follows about people visiting the Ohel. In a deeper sense, the Ohel, at the sacred resting place of the tzaddik's body, over which hovers some of the tzaddik's saintliness of soul, separated is from the surrounding world by its walls and roof, transfers all those who enter into it into a different world, far removed from our troublesome world, into an awe-inspiring sanctuary, where, for a time at any rate, they find themselves in unity with the soul of the tzaddik. After spending a few moments in this sacred space, reciting prayers there, and remembering the saintly tzaddik and his work, we find ourselves filled with humility and repentance and inspired to greater efforts in upholding the sacred legacy which he has left us and walking in the godly path which he had taught us. So the Rebbe is saying how important and how special it is to pray at the gravesite of a tzaddik. So I would encourage everybody to go to ohel.org. They also have an app that you could send a note to with your name and your mother's name or any request that you may have, and God will surely hear them on high in the merit of these great tzaddikim. Wishing everybody a good Shabbos, and God willing, we will see you next week.